Yeah, needless to say, Kyrie Irving's body language was not great, but at least he was on the court, unlike Ben Simmons. So, yeah, the Nets went down 0-3 to the Celtics on Saturday, and now Ben Simmons woke up and he has a little bit of a backache, so now he can't play. So, fact or fiction, Jenks, this Ben Simmons trade was really for nothing.
I'm going to say fiction because I know they wanted these three guys to play together this year. That was certainly the plan, but it wasn't a move made for this year only. Even Kevin Durant talking will say, "I'm here now. Like I'm not going anywhere. We're excited about Ben and the future of this franchise." So it certainly did not play out the way the Nets anticipated, but long term, you still got KD at the top of his game. You've got Kyrie who will be able to play in all of the games presumably next year, and hopefully you have a healthy Ben Simmons. You got Seth Curry. At its strength, if this group of talent has time to gel next year, to play up to their potential, then they will be a real threat. And yes, they wanted it to happen this season. It didn't happen, but this was a long-term play because Simmons is so young. So I'll say fiction.
It wasn't for nothing because James Harden wasn't playing either, right? So they just traded one
Yeah.
star who didn't want to play for another star who didn't want to play. So from that aspect, it wasn't nothing, I suppose. They also got some other pieces in the deal. Seth Curry has actually been pretty good for the Nets when he's healthy. And also Andre Drummond is a pretty good option down low. He has not been very much of a factor during the series against the Celtics. In fact, I think I would take any unders on him just because for some reason he hasn't been, part of the rotation nearly as much in this series. But no, like it wasn't for nothing. At least you have to make the effort to try to make your team better. And this was that. Like they were at least trying. It's not their fault that Ben Simmons won't set foot on a basketball court unless he's in street clothes. So no, it's not for nothing. It is very frustrating that you have one of the best defensive players in the entire NBA that all of a sudden, always has like back issues or something because all season long, haven't we heard the same update? Maybe he'll be ready in a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks rolls around. Well, he's not ready. Maybe in a couple days, maybe in game 4. And I think the question I have is if this series was 2-1 as opposed to 0-3 or, where it's not in line for a sweep, do we think Ben Simmons would play? I think the answer is still no, because I think honestly he might be a little scared. I think there are still some mental troubles going on with Ben Simmons. Maybe it is his back. I don't know him. I don't know him personally, but I'm not going to say it's for nothing. But it is very frustrating.
As a Nets fan, why can't we just have nice things just once? Just
Nope.
once. That's all I want. Like, just a season that's like drama free, stress free. Like we're successful. This year, I gave Steve Nash and Kyrie and KD all these free passes because we were preparing for the playoffs. Ben Simmons is waiting on the sidelines to play. He was walking around like Jordan, and now we're down 0-3, and Ben Simmons has seemingly no interest in playing at all this year, even if he didn't have a backache. So, as a Nets fan, no, it wasn't for nothing because again, Nets have had a lot of failures in their 10 years. So we Nets fans are used to looking forward. So as a Nets fan, no, it's not for nothing. But after the roller coaster season that the Nets have endured, it seems like all of the drama and all the headaches and all the storylines you saw were really for nothing because you're about to get swept by a team you probably should have beaten in the first round. But moving on to the Western Conference, where you have another big name team in pretty serious trouble of losing their series, the Phoenix Suns. They are now tied 2-2 with the New Orleans Pelicans. So, fact or fiction, Chelsea, are the Suns in actual danger of losing this series?
I'll go fact. Just because Devin Booker's out, he is a huge part of the Suns offense because really he's the only guy on the court that can drop 30 points on any given night. And I thought to myself, oh, maybe Chris Paul can do that. He can step up. He's been in the league long enough. He can have a good night. But we didn't see that from him. He had an off night, and nobody had one of those nights where they could keep up scoring wise with the New Orleans Pelicans. And I know the Pelicans are not great defensively, but from a scoring standpoint, they have 3 guys that consistently can give you 20 plus. Brandon Ingram is playing out of his mind. Valanciunas is always good for 20 down low. And also CJ McCollum, who's been a huge difference maker since coming over from the Portland Trailblazers. So I don't think that the Suns are going to lose to the Pelicans in the series because, it's the Suns. We think that they have the depth and eventually things will turn around, right? But you look at the Suns without Devin Booker this season, 8-6 straight up without Devin Booker in the games that they didn't have him. So maybe they are in danger. I'll go fact.
You know what? I think fact is correct. I don't want to believe it, and I don't want it to happen. I want the Suns to be that team we saw during the regular season. I hate it when the stars aren't on the court because I understand it's a part of the game, but then you don't get you don't get an actual matchup that is the way it should be. You want your stars on the court. You want to see how a team at full strength would perform at their best. So the Suns aren't there, but we've mentioned it before. Phoenix only 8-6. That's not against the number. That's straight up without Devin Booker this season. They're just above being a 500 team without them. And now the momentum is all with New Orleans. And when you're playing an 8 seed, you're taking on a team that has absolutely nothing to lose. There were zero expectations going into this series during the regular season. No one has been talking about the Pelicans outside of the Pelicans fan base. So I don't think anyone saw this happening. I don't think it's over. I think Phoenix absolutely wins this series, but is it sort of dicey right now with Booker out? Yeah, I'll say fact.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say fact too. I mean, you don't see number 1 seeds lose to number 8 seeds very often, but this is a weird situation because you have Devin Booker who's injured. Chris Paul seemingly is just cursed in the playoffs and just can't get that ring that he needs. And Brandon Ingram has looked like a man from a different planet this series. Like when he goes off, he's been going off. CJ McCollum's been solid. He hasn't been as great as we may be accustomed to seeing from him. He had like 18 points last night, but Brandon Ingram has been a real difference maker. DeAndre Ayton is having some real trouble with Jonas Valanciunas down low. I mean, the series does shift back to the desert the next 2 games, so maybe the Suns can kind of get right, but after losing last night and going to 2-2, it's starting to make me a little bit skeptical. And even as somebody who does have a Suns future ticket, I'm getting kind of nervous over here. And going back over to the East Coast, where we have another superstar, Trae Young. He had quite the year last year in the postseason, making the Eastern Conference Finals with the Atlanta Hawks. But this year has been a little bit different story. He is averaging less than 17 points per game, scoring just 9 points last night. So fact or fiction, Jenks? You have a different view of Ice Trae after this playoff performance.
I sure do. Ice cold Trae. It used to be ice water in his veins where he's hitting down clutch shots. He's being that guy at the Garden last year. We all thought after he showed out at the Garden last year during the postseason that he was going to take the next step this year and be that guy who on the brightest stages comes through in the clutch. He's been okay. But there's a reason why there was so much optimism for the Hawks season this year, and it was because of Trae Young. It was because it looked like he was going to be that shooter, was going to be more consistent, and couldn't be held down to some of the performances that we've seen in this series. Look, he's been okay, but 8 points in game 1, 9 points in game 4, when you are the leader, the best player, a scorer on this team, and even when he dropped 25 points in game 2, he turned over the basketball 10 times. So Trae Young's still a hell of a basketball player, but I don't think of him as that elite level superstar who steps it up when the lights are brightest. And I thought that's what we were going to see this year, this season, and particularly during the postseason. He has not been great. So yeah, fact.
I'm going to go fiction just because this hasn't changed my opinion of him at all. This is always how I viewed him. He is terribly inconsistent. When he's good, he's great. But when he's bad, he's really bad. And we've seen this in the past from a lot of young superstars where it takes them a while to be consistently good because that is what differentiates the superstars from the guys that just have big nights is the consistency. And we just don't see that from Trae Young. And on the same note, you've got to give some credit to the Miami Heat defense. Even without Kyle Lowry, it's still a very good defensive team and a team that deserves some credit for shutting down the best team on the opposing team. So it's not just Trae Young being bad. It's also the fact that the Heat are playing solid defense, even though we've seen Trae struggle in some other games. I think it was one of the play-in games where he wasn't especially great in the first half against the Hornets. So I am not changing my opinion of him at all, just because this is the Trae Young that we've always seen. He's great when he's great, but he's very inconsistent.
Yeah, I completely agree. I didn't have the highest view of Trae Young going into this postseason anyway. And I remember when Jenks took the under on the first playing game, people were like, "Oh, you're crazy. Playoff Trae is amazing." And look at him now. He's having quite a tough time against that Miami Heat defense, which isn't too surprising, but you still expect him to hit at least 20 points a night, you would think, right?
Yeah,
Right.
Go ahead,
I
Chelsea.
think the problem is, like I said, it is so difficult to be consistently good. Look at the best players on the face of the earth. Look at Kevin Durant right now. When you're facing a good defense, it is so much tougher. Kevin Durant is probably the best. I'm not going to say spot up shooter, but one of the best players in isolation in the entire NBA. And look at his numbers against the Celtics. Defense matters. So it's not just on Trae Young; it's also the Heat defense as well.
I think that's a great point. It's not just Young going cold. There's a reason why he's gone cold and a reason why he's struggled, because the Heat have made it a point with Kyle Lowry and without to make sure they extend and make it difficult on him, and they have.